Hi, this is Alcan. Welcome to my live. Um, yes, as the title says, why was Puerto Rico hit so hard by the earthquakes? Um, well, let me start with some knowledge that you may not know about me. Um, Even though I was a motorman, I'm also an amateur geologist, and one thing I study over the years is earthquakes and what has happened in other places around the world and here. Um, my first knowledge of earthquakes, unfortunately, was an actual earthquake in New York City back in the 70s. My mom and I were at the Escalante department store at 14th Street Union Square, and all of a sudden, the building was starting to shake. At first, we thought it was a subway, but we began to realize it was an actual earthquake. And people back then would say, "Earthquake, New York?" Well, that's how it started. It turns out, um, by reading books and looking at information from past earthquakes, I discovered, in fact, there was an earthquake fault at the 14th Street and Union Square area. It's a small fault. It does produce earthquakes once in a blue moon, but it does happen. In fact, I discovered it because of the history of the subway system. This is the first time the subway was being built. They mentioned 14th Street, Union Square area, and they mentioned the fact that half of the street was rock and the other half was sand. It takes longer to get out rock than sand, but that's how that street was composed. So, most likely, the Escalante department store was on the section where the sand used to be. So the shaking would be a little more amplified than if it was on the rock side. And I was reading about the history of earthquakes, and sure enough, we discovered that, in fact, somewhere in the 19th century, when this fault started, it activated and aggravated a pool game that was going on at the time. There used to be a pool hall in the area, so the balls started moving by themselves. So that's what we know about faults and stuff. So with all the knowledge I had experienced over the years with the earthquakes in California and other parts of the world, I can give you a clear picture of what was going on with Puerto Rico's situation. That part of Puerto Rico, the southern part, in fact, has 3 faults. Even I wasn't aware of those faults. So apparently, the North American plate and the Caribbean plate, when they were banging up against each other, they were aggravating the faults. So one of those faults gave away. So that's unfortunate. Now, the other problem that Puerto Rico has with its infrastructure and its buildings, it's built for hurricanes, but not built for earthquakes. I mean, Maria can, as you may know, a hurricane did some damage on the island, mostly to the electrical grid, but a lot of homes survived. But the problem is, what's built for a hurricane is not necessarily built for earthquakes, because the structure of the buildings is unreinforced masonry. That means brick, stone, sometimes concrete, even though they have rebar in it. If you don't have reinforcements in that stuff, or if it's stiff, it's not going to flex in an earthquake. And that's exactly what happened Tuesday when the columns, some were too small, some just had 2 pieces of rebar in it. It couldn't withstand the shaking from the 6.5 earthquake, or 6.4. They changed it. And unfortunately, that's what happened to this particular house where the first casualty in 102 years took place. So, if you want to have an idea how bad other places had fared in an earthquake, if you go back to the Bay Area back in 1989, when that earthquake took place, the roadway used to be called the Cypress Expressway. 14 blocks of that expressway collapsed. And the reason why is they misunderstood the power of earthquakes when they were building the structure. And one of the problems was those 14 blocks were built on what they call bay mud. That means that because it wasn't solid rock, the ground wasn't solid, it liquefied. It means that the ground, it looks solid. As soon as you put water on it, it turns to liquid. It turns to water, and it disappears. So unfortunately, the land underneath that expressway caused more strain on the structure of the expressway, causing it to break apart. So that's the reason why the expressway collapsed. In some places, you have places where it's solid rock, and some places there may not be solid. And the amplifications could be worse in certain areas. In some areas, you just have a normal shaking, and that's it. So we don't know what kind of land was underneath these buildings when it happened, but most likely it was soil or landfill. Something that's not solid rock is going to amplify the shaking of the building and causing the collapse. So that is one of the biggest problems here. And also, you got to remember, in 10 days or so, it's the 10th anniversary of the Haitian earthquake that destroyed Port-au-Prince. The buildings are basically the same, even though they are poorly maintained. Unfortunately, in some cases, some houses can withstand the shaking, not because of what was made, but sometimes they cannot be maintained, especially if you don't have the money to fix your place. You know, the earthquake doesn't care how much money you have or how little it is. If it feels like you knock it down, it's going to try to knock it down. That is a sad fact about earthquakes. It doesn't discriminate. It hurts everybody equally. Now, the situation is also, we don't know if this is going to be the last of the earthquakes, because as far as we know right now, there's aftershocks happening as we speak. The power hasn't still been restored on the island, even though the promise it was supposed to be by this afternoon. Of course, people are worried. They're outside sleeping where they can. And once again, I had to emphasize, Puerto Rico did experience a much bigger earthquake 102 years ago. There was a 7.3 in the northeastern part of the island, and it produced a tsunami. Now, the Tuesday's morning earthquake did they did have a warning system activated for a possible tsunami, but nothing materialized, so it was canceled. But this is a situation you have to be concerned about, because if there's anything bigger than this coming, and believe me, if it's like 7 in the ocean near Puerto Rico, yes, it's most likely there will be a tsunami. How big, we don't know. And we all seen the incidents that happened in Japan, in Asia. After a strong earthquake, there was a tsunami. Of course, in Japan, they knew it was coming. They were able to evacuate. They still had a loss of life, but at least they were able to evacuate. But other parts in Asia, with the Boxer Day earthquake, they didn't stand a chance. And I'm wondering, once again, if the government of Puerto Rico has done any kind of drills or instructions what to do in case of an earthquake. Of course, the thing is that there is a tsunami. What people know they have to go to higher ground. So this is something concerning. Also, when they do decide to rebuild or repair these homes, they're going to have to make it stronger than they were to avoid a future problem. But there's some houses and some buildings that most likely would have to be torn down because it's beyond repaired. In fact, there was a bridge in the area that also collapsed in the earthquake. So that's going to be another problem, getting help certain areas. Also, some areas also had boulders that landed on the roadways and landslides. So hopefully they could take care of that. But this is something that Puerto Rico is going to have to deal with for a long time to come, because we don't know when this earthquake activity is going to subside or not. So it is heartbreaking to see part of my culture, family history is getting attacked by something you can't see. Only you could feel it when the ground's moving. So, and just to briefly, I understand there was like over 346 injuries, 1 death. Besides the power out, there's about 300,000 people without water. I don't know when that's going to be restored. So this is an ongoing situation, and we're just going to have to find a way to help these folks out. So I'm going to suggest that if the Red Cross, if they have a GoFundMe page, whatever you have to do, just remember you don't let people try to suck you in doing something and then it's not going where it's supposed to go. Because I'm sure we have con artists ready to do that right now. So you have to be careful who you donate to. All right, so this is Al Can saying so long for now. Don't forget your stop. Good night. Everybody in Puerto Rico is doing all right. I know it's going to be a bumpy night. For how long, we don't know. So, good night. Take care, everyone. Hi to Jesus and Kimberly, Emily, and Bernadette. Okay, good night.